Once there was a baker who ran a small bakery in a quiet town in America. He wasn't a kind man. He never gave his customers more bread than what they had paid for. He would always make sure to sell them just enough to meet the cost. He never smiled at anyone either. But despite his grumpy nature, the baker was very good at his job. His bread was the softest, fluffiest bread anyone could ever imagine. His cakes were also incredibly delicious and people loved them. Customers would come to his bakery from all over the town. They would walk down the street, and as they got closer to the bakery, they could smell the wonderful scent of freshly baked bread and cakes. The smell would be so inviting that many people couldn't resist coming in to buy. But not everyone went inside. Some people would just stand outside the shop, their mouths watering, taking in the delicious smell of the bread and cakes, and looking through the windows. The baker did not like this one bit. Their stomachs are already full of the smell of my bread, he thought. I'm giving them a free meal, and I'm getting nothing in return for my hard work. The idea made him very upset. He wanted to find a way to make people pay for the smell of his bread. Maybe I can put these wonderful smells into bottles, he thought. Then I can sell them just like I sell my bread. One cold winter morning, while the baker was up early making bread, he wasn't in a good mood. He complained to himself about waking up so early, the cold weather, and everything that bothered him. But in the middle of his complaints, he looked up and saw someone outside his shop. It was a young man dressed in an old coat. He was standing outside the bakery, staring at the fresh bread through the window. The man was smiling, and he could be seen breathing in the delicious smell of the bread. The sight of the man made the baker even angrier. That thief outside my shop, he thought. He's filling his stomach with the smell of my bread. He's having a free breakfast, and I'm getting nothing for all my hard work. The young man didn't move. He just stood there with his eyes closed, enjoying the smell of the freshly baked bread. The baker could feel his blood boiling. He walked to the door and opened it with a slam. He shouted at the man, "You need to pay me!" The young man looked confused. "Pay you for what?" he asked, not understanding. "For the smells you've stolen," the baker said angrily. The young man was even more confused now. "I haven't stolen anything," he replied. "I'm just smelling the air." The baker grew more upset. "Air is free, but not when it's full of the smells from my bakery." He shouted, "You need to pay me now or I'll call the police." The young man didn't know what to say. He just stood there, still unsure of what the baker was talking about. "But I haven't done anything wrong," he said, trying to explain. Without waiting for an answer, the baker grabbed the man by the coat and dragged him through the snow toward the judge's house. He knocked on the door. After a long wait, the judge finally opened the door. He was still in his night clothes, looking sleepy and surprised. "What's all this noise at such an early hour?" he asked. The baker quickly explained. "This man is a thief. He stole the smells from my bakery." The judge blinked, confused. "Smells? You woke me up at 6 in the morning for this?" he asked, still not understanding. "Come inside and tell me your story." The judge went back into the house to get dressed, and the baker and the young man waited outside. After a few minutes, the judge came back and invited them inside. They all sat down around a large table. "Now tell me what happened," the judge said. "Baker, you go first." The baker quickly began explaining. "This man was outside my shop and he was stealing the smell of my bread. He didn't buy anything. He just stood there and enjoyed the free breakfast my bread is giving him." The judge listened quietly, then turned to the young man. "What do you have to say for yourself?" The young man took a deep breath before speaking. Your Honor, I didn't steal anything. Air is free. I wasn't taking anything that belonged to the baker. I was just enjoying the smell of his bread like anyone would. The judge sat quietly for a few moments, thinking. The baker grew impatient and began talking. Again about how the young man had stolen from him. But the judge raised his hand, signaling the baker to stop. Enough, the judge said. I've made my decision. The baker stopped talking and listened carefully. Young man, the judge began, do you have any money? The young man reached into his pocket and pulled out a few coins. This is all the money I have in the world, he said, showing the judge the small amount of change he had. Give those coins to me, the judge ordered. The young man handed over the coins, and the judge held them in his hand. I've listened to both of your stories, and it's clear that the smells coming from the bakery belong to the baker. And it's true that this young man enjoyed those smells without paying. So I have decided that the young man must pay for the smells he took. The baker smiled, perhaps for the first time in his life. He stretched out his hand eagerly to take the money, expecting the judge to hand over the coins. But the judge didn't give the baker the coins. Instead, he shook the coins in his hand, and the sound of the clinking money echoed through the room. The baker looked confused. Give me my coins, he demanded. No, the judge replied calmly. I've decided that the best way to pay for the smell of bread is with the sound of money. The judge smiled as he handed the coins back to the young man. You may go home now, he said kindly. The baker stood there, shocked and speechless. He didn't know what to say. He had expected to get the money, but now the judge had decided that the sound of the coins was more important than the actual payment. The young man, still confused but thankful, took the coins from the judge's hand. He looked at the baker, who was still standing there in disbelief. The baker was angry at first, but as he stood there in silence, he realized something. The judge's words were true. The sound of money was a symbol of the baker's hard work, the smell of his bread, and the value of what he had made. But in the end, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the work, the effort and the joy that the bread brought to the people. The young man left the judge's house, and the baker turned slowly and walked back to his shop. The bakery was quiet now, with no one outside smelling the fresh bread. But as the baker stood there, he thought about how the world had changed just a little bit. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn to be a little kinder, a little less focused on the money, and more focused on what truly mattered.